and a pleasure to lead this concluding session. This is we're concluding with discussion of friendship, and just as we lead into it, it's worth noting, and I think not insignificant at all, that many of us have been meeting every couple of years since the 2003, if my memory serves correctly. And what's emerged during that time is nothing less than profound friendships. And even though, and in the truest sense of the word, not just colleagues, not just people we see regularly, not in the loosest sense, but in an abiding, transcendent way, many of us who see each other only every other year have developed a level of openness and trust and conviction and belief in one another that can only be called friendship. And that's a unique contribution of what this gathering is about. So I want to start my introduction to this last session with those comments of appreciation to what it means to be here. But as we come to a conclusion, those of us who are going to summarize some thoughts also have a challenge. Because we have come together, any of us who come together start with certain preconditions and presuppositions that are easy to endorse. We recognize the legitimacy of the other. We recognize the legitimacy that there is an essential humanness that brings us together. We recognize that learning from the other is not incidental, but something that defines the value of our being together. So while it's important to affirm that, and this session certainly affirms it, it's also important for us not to think that that is sufficient. Because we cannot assume that the entire world agrees with us. We can't assume that our learnings from COVID-19 or our studies about what it means to be colleagues and friends in the deepest sense are something that is shared either by our own co-religionists or by others around the world. So as we come to this last session, our challenge is, what do we do with our understandings as we prepare to go forth as religious leaders to influence the world, to accept our understandings, to be changed by them, and to be improved by, and interreligious understanding helps to improve the quality of life in the world, and even the legitimacy of quality of life in the world.
One thing I would want to say as a participant and as a member of this group is that often we talk too much in terms of theories. You know, we are good at theologizing, but from listening to all the contributions, I think Richard actually took this out of my my note when he shared with us in our little group. What I would want us to emphasize as religious leaders is the living out, the practical dimension of each of these concepts. In my field of Islamic studies, we use the concept of praxis. Praxis, that is to actually live out what our religious convictions are. And for me, I have heard different testimonies from a good number of those who've made contributions. For example, this whole idea of friendship, I shared with my breakout group earlier on, when we were looking at the idea of what it means for someone who says, I cannot relate to someone who is outside my religious conviction. And I shared with them an experience I had about 8 years ago when our middle son, who was then 24, died of an illness while studying at Bristol University. And it was a horrible time for me and the members of my family. But the person God used to actually minister to me is the Sultan of Sokoto, who is the spiritual head of all the Muslims in Nigeria, a Muslim. My own colleagues, bishops, archbishops like myself, a good number of them marginalized me, including the head or the representative of the Anglican Church in Nigeria. Why? Because he felt personally I was too close to the West. So tell me about love. Tell me about friendship. Religion should not discriminate. For me, that is one thing I have seen and I've heard throughout these 3 days of sharing. And so, my sisters and brothers, as religious leaders, if we do want one world, a world that is created and sustained by God, we call him God. Others refer to him as in some other names. We need, as religious leaders, to actually practice what we say to people. But I have a challenge for all of us. I live in the West, and all of us here are from the West. Religion is being used politically. Is there something all of us can do as religious leaders? Religion should bring us together, but I see religion being used as a form of division, to divide us. You are a Jew, you are a non-Jew. You are a Muslim, you are a non-Muslim. You are a Christian and a non-Christian. Where, therefore, is this concept of unity in diversity? For me, that is the challenge I'm taking away from this conference. What has given me hope? And I speak as someone from Africa, where we use religion, as a facade for all our political and whatever. What has given me hope during the course of these 3 days is the ease, the sincerity with which we've used each other's scripture or tradition without any hesitations. I've heard people quote from the Jewish Bible, from the Christian Bible, from the Quran. For me, it gives me hope as an African who is a Christian, working with my Muslim neighbors in particular. Now, how do we take this forward? I would want to encourage us not to stop here. It is not a game. We're not playing any games. This is from our heart. I will therefore, like I said earlier on, hope that we will be able to translate what we have done together these 3 days back to our constituencies so that we can reproduce ourselves, as it were.
Talking about hope, the moment of hope has been given up by COVID. Why I say that? It has given us moments of isolation. And in that moments of isolation, we have got the solitude, which has given us the opportunity to isolate the truth from the untruth. So the hope is we. We are the hope. And I see in this tremendous positive coming together of so much of energy and wisdom and power, because we have the reach, we have the outreach, we have the resources to let people know what is really good for us. And
I just feel so strengthened by the various voices I've heard from different traditions, and the recognition of a common language common aspiration, a common, I would say, spiritual horizon that has sort of emerged for me from these conversations. Yes, what you're saying is exactly corresponding to what I'm feeling and thinking myself, and to have that sort of personal sense enlarged, confirmed, stretched by the interaction with people in different traditions. It's just been an immense gift. I think for some reason of Zechariah and the wonderful phrase, prisoners of hope. What does it mean to be a prisoner of hope? I think it means to be taken captive by the hope that is in this group and being able to live out of that hope as we go on with whatever our work or our mission may be. Thank you.
Given me so much hope is the genuine, real feeling of friendship that I've felt over these 3 days. I always feel it in Elijah, but it was very, very strong. And because there's so much that is false and insincere in the world, when you experience this kind of, as Josiah said, sincerity and I would say truth, you feel there is hope. Really beautiful in all of this was that we were asked to comment on something that a person from another tradition had said. And so it was very beautiful to think about what they were saying and what they were meaning, and to feel the power of that. And so if it can happen within a small group, it can surely be multiplied, and we can spread it out to others also.
What is the opposite to hope? Desperation. And what is the synonym for hope? Optimism. And what is against optimism? Pessimism. So to have a hope, you don't need to look for reason. The hope does not have the reason, because everything is if you rationalize, then you sometimes lose the hope. We have to spread the hope without reason, without reasoning. And we have to spread the optimism, because if you are not optimist, you cannot have creative thinking. The desperation and pessimism prevent you from creative thinking. And today we need creative thinking, and we need to encourage other people not to lose hope and not to be pessimist. Life is good. So we have to think now, as religious people as well, about life before death. We usually speak about the life after death, about which we don't know almost nothing. But we may know about the life before death. And this is our duty as religious leaders.
We have to place more trust in God and the wisdom of our revered scriptures. That will provide us with unshakable optimism, faith, trust, and whatever you want. So this is actually proved when we are talking like this, within this interfaith event. I believe we should have unflinching conviction that we will succeed. And that can come about if we inculcate and practice virtues and values in ourselves. Rights must be balanced with responsibilities. Now, in the contemporary world, Corona has taught us technology, which is virtual reality. To me, God is actual reality. Believing is seeing, as opposed to seeing is believing.
I'm very, very happy. Why I'm so happy, and this is also a reason of hope for the future. I think we must give a base to our hope. As a religious leader, we cannot only say we must be optimistic, we must be hopeful, because this is, of course, a good wish and a perspective, but you know, the feelings come and go. We must give something that is a base for this. And for us religious leaders, the base is God. We have hope because we believe in God. And for us all, I think, in a way or another, we think that God is love, that God is goodness. And so we must experience this and announce this first. Second, I would also say in a practical way, what a teacher of mine when I was a young man taught me, and has saved my life, so to say. He told us in a classroom this story. This, a preacher, a preacher starting his preaching, saying with a sheet, what you see on this sheet. He had before put a black point on the sheet. So what do you see on this? And everybody answered, we see a black point. And he answered, and you don't see all the white? This has saved my life. When I have this possibility to meet other people, also for the first time, first thing I do is to see all the white. Perhaps at the end, I find also some black point. But I must say that in this meeting, I didn't find any black point. So my hope is really great.
In Islam, if there is the closest thing to an original sin, although we don't have really original sin, is Adam's forgetfulness, and therefore the fundamental antidote to that is remembrance, dhikr we call it, and nisyan is forgetfulness. So it is for us to remember, and I think what this event has contributed for us is remembering who we are, remembering who our friends are, remembering who, what the deepest meanings of our faith are. And in terms of moving forward, which I think was one of the things that we were discussing earlier, I believe that the challenge for us today is to create as much as possible, a language that is universal to all of us. Just as we know, for example, we can have different words for love, but the experience of love itself is important. The language of experience is what we have to base our future on. The language of that which is substantive and is nourishing to the human heart and human soul, because that is what really anchors our hope and fuels our hope and nourishes it and feeds it.
And from where I am, there's much hope, I think, and the hope is in the faces of everyone that I'm looking at. I'd like to take a camera and take a photograph, because each one of you who is here is the hope that we all need. Thank you very much.
It seems to me that as I listen carefully, one of the things that emerges is that we see the concept of hope not simply as a baseline of pastoral support for each other and for those in our communities, but rather a mandate for us to carry forth with courage and conviction the message that emerges from our collegiality, our earned friendship over time, and so that if we understand hope as a positive, proactive mandate, it seems to me that we are motivated to go forth from here and to have the proper kind of influence on our communities going forward.